Good evening, everyone. On behalf of EkonNiti, IIM Shillong's Economics and Public Policy Club, I, Atharva Mulmule, and I have with me my friend Anushka Agarwal. We invite you to this very interesting conversation that we are going to have today. Our guest, we are honored to have Dr. Charan Singh with us. He has a large experience of 2 decades working with RBI, followed by his association with IMF. He has also played key leadership role as chairman of Punjab and Sindh Bank during the crucial period. And we are going to discuss today one of the very interesting topics that Sir has been talking about for past decade, that is the inflation targeting framework. Welcome, Sir, to our podcast.
Thank you so much.
To start with, Sir, for our audience, could you give us the key motivations that the Indian government had in mind when we adopted the 2016 framework?
Yes, actually, I have been talking about inflation targeting before even 2016. And I've been saying that inflation targeting was adopted in New Zealand in late 1980s, not as part of any scientific exercise, but it was adopted more from a political angle in a radio talk. It got very quickly adopted by many other countries in the world, including Bank of England. And therefore it became very fashionable to follow it. To some extent, International Monetary Fund also started asking countries if they want to anchor inflation through inflation targeting. So the chief economic advisor of the IMF, Professor Raghuram Rajan, when he came over to India, became the chief economic advisor Government of India and later as the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He wanted that India should also adopt inflation targeting. As a matter of principle, as I have mentioned earlier, there was no scientific basis that inflation targeting is a superior tool to the one which we had been practicing, the multiple indicator approach. The multiple indicator approach in a young demographic country like ours takes into account various factors. Now, after the Lehman Brothers 2008, good amount of research appeared which said that inflation targeting works as a blinker on the eyes of the central bank. And therefore, you had the global financial crisis. If the multiple indicator approach was in use, the global financial crisis would not have happened. So my line of thought has always been that India should not have adopted inflation targeting even in 2016, though the stated objective was we want to anchor expectations. But I argued that in a country like ours, expectations may not be playing a very important role because everything is being decided by the central bank of the country. Unlike the advanced countries, where there is a soft touch regulation and soft touch policy, expectation formation plays an important role. So to answer this question of yours, that what was the motivation of India government asking the central bank, my answer would be theoretically because Bank of England and other countries had adopted it, it looked fashionable to adopt it. But other than that, in a young demographic India, I don't think there was any scientific basis of adopting.
Thank you for that insight, sir. Sir, our next question to you is, so now that you have told us about the key motivations, what could be what could have been the better timing or better conditions that India could have launched this framework in at that time?
Well, my own thought is the multiple indicator approach, which we had been using earlier, one variable in that is inflation, but it has fiscal indicators, it has monetary indicators, balance of payment indicators. It's a very wide indicator, and all those are very, very important. Suppose before the global financial crisis, if the world was fixated to the multiple indicator approach, they would have been looking at the balance sheets of commercial banks and saying, look, what is happening to stressed assets? When the mortgage-backed securities were being sliced and diced and marketed under the multiple indicator approach, that would have been a red signal. So, my argument is inflation targeting, even for advanced countries, was not actually the right target. It so happened after the global financial crisis, professors at Harvard, especially Jeffrey Frankel, said inflation targeting is dead. Queen in UK asked their economist, what happened? You have the most sophisticated models. How come you were not able to predict the global financial crisis? So, not only for an emerging country like India, not only for a special India which has young demographic dividend, even for advanced countries, this was a blinkered approach to policy making. So there was, according to me, inflation targeting was not a tool which we should have adopted. Now there are a number of studies which looked at, did countries which adopt inflation targeting perform better than countries which did not perform? There's an excellent study by Lawrence Ball, and he said makes no difference. My own working paper at IIM Bangalore found that makes no difference. So if your intention is to keep inflation under control and not have hyperinflation, you can always do it. But you cannot have a blinkered approach of ignoring others and only focusing on inflation target.
So as you mentioned in one of our earlier questions, that the major motivations was that the Western world was adopting this model. And you've also cautioned, right from your articles in 2014, that there are a lot of contextual differences when it comes to a subcontinent-sized country like India. So could you enlighten us on some of the contextual differences that you think of that are much different from directly adopting a Western assembled model?
Exactly. Like I always have been arguing, that India is a very unique country. It's actually not a country, it's a continent. It has so many differences within the economy. The fiscal, the monetary issues are very different. Even now, if you take a simple example, we have the modern CPI, and if you look at the inflation in different regions of the country, rural and urban and state-wise, you find big differences in inflation. Country is the same, monetary policy is the same, still inflationary pressures are different. Very vast country. More than that, the financial sector is not as linked or as efficient as you would expect in an advanced country like England or UK. Markets speak to each other. Our markets are developing, but they are obviously not as efficient as those in America or in the UK. Even in those countries, the transmission mechanism of the inflation targeting approach takes 2 years. In a country which is like ours, where markets are segmented, and you want to use a tool, say, which will have a transmission mechanism of 2 years, within 2 years many things will happen here. There can be flood and a drought. There can be simply onion, potato or tomato prices changing and the whole inflation figure changes. So, while the markets are not as efficient, they are not speaking to each other, the reasons why inflation takes place could be for very frivolous reasons, some agriculture product misbehaving, unlike those countries where inflation could be demand driven. In a country like ours, if inflation is tomato driven, what can an interest rate do? Or onion driven? Do you think the farmer who's growing the onion is going to be impacted by your repo rate? So I kept arguing that in the advanced countries, the circumstances, the economic factors, the demand side variables, the financial literacy is so different. Those just supplementing, just supplanting, adapting a model from those countries and implanting here is not the right approach. Still, in a young country, young demographics, where the markets are now being groomed, advanced, be it a foreign exchange market, credit market, banking market, where the markets are still being groomed, maybe the infant industry argument should be used and the central bank should look at various parameters. I would say it's lazy banking because the rest of the world adopted inflation targeting. You say, I have also adopted inflation targeting and get away with it. That's not the way. You have to be responsible for a young country where markets are still growing, people are there looking for jobs, and the jobs that Indians are looking for could be self-employment in a very big way. Interest rate plays a very significant role in this. So you just can't say that I'm only chasing inflation and not worried about the rest of the factors.
Thank you, sir. Now, we would like to know that it's been a decade already. So, how would you assess India's experience with inflation targeting? Has it helped the economy to achieve growth, or has it compromised the growth?
That's a very relevant question. And I'll tell you the reason for the big relevance of that question. 10 years have gone by. In this 10 years, many things have happened. The most important thing that has happened is you have a prime minister who is talking of Viksit Bharat 2047, 22 years from today. Now in these circumstances, we are growing around 6.5%. If we want to be Viksit, and the definition of Viksit we all understand, you can dilute it by saying that we are looking for a more equitable society, or a society which has zero poverty, or which has high quality school education, healthy labor force. You can say all that. But the global yardstick, the benchmark, is per capita income. If you want to be Viksit, you have to attain the per capita income of about 17,000 in 22 years. From 2,880 today, 6.5% is, congratulations, growing fast, but that's not going to take you into Viksit Bharat. To become Viksit Bharat, we need 9% growth. Therefore, in these 10 years, the new objective provided to us as Viksit Bharat means everything we need to do which unleashes creativity. Therefore, anything which restricts, strangulates, suffocates growth is going to be detrimental to achieve Viksit Bharat. So these 10 years we have experimented. Nothing much has happened. We have not really benefited from inflation targeting. World over, inflation has been sober. So has it been in our country also. So there is nothing to worry. Now I think anything which comes in the way of Viksit Bharat, anything which strangulates our potential growth is easily 9%. Korea, amongst the worst times, grew above 8% for 30 odd years. China, the worst of worst global times, uncertainties, it grew at 10% for 30 odd years. We need not be shy. We need to put our strategies together, keeping Viksit Bharat that the Prime Minister has given us. We should plan for about 9% growth, and it's so obvious inflation targeting always has sacrifice ratio. We cannot afford a sacrifice ratio of growth in the current time. For the next 22 years, no sacrifice. We can tolerate a slightly high inflation, nothing wrong in it. I do not see a reason why inflation should be pegged at 4%. Our 30-year average is 5.5. Good studies show that at 5.5, the threshold level will grow faster. So therefore, lifting the inflation target to 6% should not be a bad idea. Growth has to be the focus. We are adding 1 crore people in workforce every year. We have to create that many jobs. The fear of artificial intelligence which is eating us up, which is a phenomenon of the last 10 years. On one hand, the Prime Minister says Viksit Bharat. On the other hand, artificial intelligence, machine learning is sitting on top of us. Our jobs are going to get lost. So to create jobs for our youth, self-employment and otherwise, anything which deters growth, anything which leads to sacrifice ratio should be just left aside.
Sir, so you have touched upon the inflation side inflation that is driven by supply-driven side, particularly fuel and food, as you commonly say, OTP, onions, tomatoes, and potatoes. So, do you think in a scenario like this, is monetary policy the only solution to this, or will need something more to supplement it along?
That's exactly the point I'm making. When supply side shocks happen, and I've written it even to the global economist, when supply side shocks happen, since when is the interest rate to be used as a tool against them? Interest rate is a tool for demand driven issues. Americans tried after the Russia-Ukraine war, when inflation shot up to 9 to 10%, 5 times their 30-year average. For 2 years they have used their interest rate tool. They have not been able to bring it to 2%. Neither Europe nor England. It's not a tool for supply side shock. For supply side shock, we economists have to think of a different tool. Our all studies on aggregate demand, aggregate supply show us that it's not precise. The tool, that interest rate that we are using, is a blunted tool in case of supply side shocks. Other tools have to be used. Other techniques have to be used. Maybe global diplomacy has to be used. If Russia-Ukraine war is pushing up prices of certain agriculture commodities or petroleum goods or rare earths, interest rate is not going to play a role there. It has not played a role in the last 2.5 years. So therefore, insisting with interest rate as a tool is only detrimental for growth. And earlier the economists and public policy experts and economic advisors realize, the better, because later on, a few years from today, we all will be questioned on the sacrifice ratio. And who is accountable for that? Especially in a country like India, where we have young teeming millions, we have to provide them jobs. In the last 10 years, much has happened, and therefore we need to revisit inflation targeting, and my suggestion is go back to multiple indicator approach.
Certainly, sir. Moving ahead, we would like to know whether this framework has enhanced India's credibility and communication, or has it limited RBI's flexibility to address the real economic challenges in India?
See, I'll be honest with you. Once you adopt which the world says is a great benchmark, your reputation and credibility certainly does improve. So everybody says, hey, they are also doing inflation targeting. But at the end of the day, am I here to please them? I'm a country by my own self, and a continent-sized country, and I have my own responsibilities. I'm more accountable to my youth than to those people. Once I am convinced that I am more accountable to my own people, they will be convinced easily. They understand. Are they not understanding the compulsions of China? And every time China gets away with something, it's the IMF which bats for China and says we understand their problems, their responsibilities, and therefore we grant them this freedom. Similarly, if Indian economic policy experts also take a stance and are courageous to say our local, domestic issues are so grim that inflation targeting, we have tried it for 10 years, is certainly not helpful for us. Your AI and machine learning can become a threat to my population and employment opportunities. The rest of the world fully understands it. And therefore, we can also use the empirical evidence from rest of the world and show them their own literature which shows that inflation targeting countries did not score very high on inflation target performance and evaluation. So where is the worry?
So coming to the sacrifice ratio that we have been talking about, particularly with the jobs that are being lost with AI, as you mentioned, how do we understand the gravity of the problem of increasing sacrifice ratio at the cost of maintaining our interest rates and inflation rates?
Absolutely. Means today nobody will talk about. But few years from today, everybody will question that how come your potential growth was to be 9 to 10%. You had the young population raring to go and you were growing at 6%. What were the policies which were holding you back? Where was the strategy to enhance your growth from 6.5 to 9.5%? You would then argue that I was trying to provide stability to inflation. Somebody can then question, what did you mean by stability to inflation? Why did you fixate your inflation target at 4%? You could have provided stability to inflation even at 6%. But the priority had to be my potential growth. My potential growth, Y star as we teach in the class, is basically ensuring everybody is fully employed. Right now, we all know that our youth are not fully employed. We also know educated youth is certainly suffering from very high unemployment. Therefore, the potential output is not reached. Our unemployment is very high, especially the educated youth, which can be very productive. And hence, I think the whole approach towards inflation targeting will get questioned in 5 to 10 years, especially by 2047, if we do not achieve the Viksit Bharat target. People will say, you had a prime minister which was so willing. You had economists who were pointing out, how come everything was silenced and you continue to just walk at 6.5%? So I think the policy experts really need to put their heads together and say and decide once for all, after Viksit Bharat, we will see what to do. Nobody is saying that we are looking at inflation above 15% or even 2 digits, double digit at 10%. But I think there is nothing to feel shy of if we are able to anchor inflation around 6%.
So you just suggested that we can move towards a flexible band of 5 to 7% inflation. How do you think how this framework can help us improve policy realism and effectiveness of such inflation targeting?
Absolutely. That's a compromise that I'm doing. I'm saying that if you are so much wedded to the idea of inflation target, then come out with a more realistic pivot. And the pivot, going by the 30-year experience, going by the young demographic dividend that I have, I'm proposing a 6% pivot, and therefore I'm saying a band of 5 to 7%. I'm very clear in my mind. In a young demographic country like ours, unlike Japan, where 40% of the population is above 60 years, we have this window only for next 20 years. After that, even in India, aging will start. Once we miss this window, we will not get an opportunity again for many years. Can Japan get an opportunity now with 40% population above 60 years? Never. Therefore, this is the golden opportunity. And for this golden opportunity, as a compromise, I'm saying, okay, move up the pivot from 4 to 6%. And if inflation varies between 5 to 7%, don't react. Just accept it. But your yardstick should be employment. That is where the whole focus for the next 22 years is. Because the objective is Viksit Bharat. Viksit Bharat clearly means your GDP has to be close to your potential GDP and not anyway deviate from that potential. Let's achieve it. That's my objective.
So, sir, we have discussed at length the yardstick of inflation targeting, and you have interestingly mentioned the multiple indicator approach that we have been using since 2000s, particularly under Governor Jalan and Governor Reddy. So, could you tell us how that is different and that has helped us to absorb the global shocks, and how you see it to be the way forward?
Absolutely, much balanced approach. Various indicators that are factored in the multiple indicator approach. And you are not accountable by single parameter, and you cannot get away by writing a letter saying my inflation target was not achieved because OPEC raised the prices, or there was a hike in the corn prices, or something happened in the global market. No, you are the central bank. You are the monetary authority. You have to take accountability for the complete financial sector. Inflation is just one of that. Non-performing assets are the other. Credit to the commercial sector is still another. And you have to take parameters like the exchange rate, the international reserves, the current account deficit. So multiple indicator approach is a 360-degree approach. If you are driving on the highway and you simply say I was looking forward and this car came and hit me from the side, it's no way. Your car has been hit, you are going to suffer now losses. Therefore, in every good driving school, they will teach you, you have the side mirrors, which you should constantly keep looking, and you have the rear view mirror, which you should also be looking. Front is only part of your strategy for a safe journey. That's exactly what I'm saying under multiple indicator approach. You have to take a 360-degree view of where the economy is, where the population is, what my objective is. In that, multiple indicator approach will give you a highly balanced strategy. It's a multi-pronged strategy, and you will be accountable for all those things. You will not be able to escape your responsibility by saying, well, I've kept inflation under tap. For others, that's not my responsibility. You can't get away with that.
So, as we know, in October, the inflation rates have been historically low at 0.25. And while we are having this conversation today in November end, we are expecting the Monetary Policy Committee meeting to happen in the December 1st week. So, after having this conversation, as a way forward, what do you think our monetary philosophy would be like going forward? Would it be more a rule-based system or more a judgment-driven system that you would advocate for?
So, I'm also not saying that you should not have a rule-based system. All I'm saying is you should not be wedded so strictly to the rule-based system, because the challenges of your economy are far more than the challenges which Bank of England faces. Small, in that sense, an economy with less population, less pressures. My pressures are massive. On one hand, I have a young demographic. On the other hand, I have to expand employment opportunities. I have to finance industry and MSMEs. I have yet to even finance my agriculture sector. My infrastructure is not fully prepared. I have to take care of all that. In England, I don't have to take care of all those things. Those are already done 100 years ago. Given my circumstances, I have to prepare for it.